But for now, I'll stop the screen sharing of this one and I'll show you a video on the macro-regional strategy of the Baltic Sea region, the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region. Enjoy.
Welcome to the introduction to the macro-regional strategies, laboratories for a new Europe. My name is Anders Bergström, and I'm a horizontal action coordinator in the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region. I will, in a few minutes, take you through the general information on the macro-regional strategies, and I will focus on 3 questions. The first one is, why are macro-regional strategies needed? The second one is, what challenges or opportunities do they address? And thirdly, how are they implemented? Let's start with the first question. Why are macro-regional strategies needed? Well, there are 3 you can say backgrounds to why these are needed. And the first one is that today's societal challenges are more and more complex, and they can't be solved by a single country, region, or municipality. There are many examples: migration, integration, the quality of marine environment, and unsustainable energy supply are a few of them. There are also opportunities that we much more effective can address together. For example, strengthening our competitiveness. Instead of competing with each other, we are working close together and compete on the world market with our products and services. The second reason is that Europe is in crisis. There are different crises that we have faced last years: financial crisis, and we are soon facing a new one, refugee crisis, Brexit, COVID-19, and we also have citizens that start to questioning their membership in the European Union, asking themselves, what's in it for me? So there is a need to reintegrate Europe because, as I said in the beginning, the challenges are more and more complex, so we actually need each other much more now than before in Europe. We also need more cost-effective solutions. So it's solving our problems together instead of reinventing wheels. We have a lot of possibilities in Europe to work together with our challenges, and that will save also resources. For example, in the mainstream programs where we are doing investments in one country that we are not aware of in the other country, and by working together we can more effectively use our resources, for example, in the mainstream programs. Macro-regional strategies are laboratories for a new Europe, where new formats are developed and tested, where more and new stakeholders are engaged. And this is something that the macro-regional strategies allow, that we can test and that we can develop new methods to work closer together. A Europe in need of more collaboration in order to effectively address our societal challenges and to make better use of our opportunities. There are some prerequisites for these macro-regional strategies. There are 3 no. No new funding, no new institution, and no new legislation. So how does it work? Well, we have a big yes, multi-level governance. To put it short, use existing resources, not just European Union, but also in our own member states, local, regional, national, channel them to the implementation of macro-regional strategies, and promote cooperation between existing institutions at all levels by engaging in collaborative working formats in a cross-sectorial manner. This is in brief an explanation to the macro-regional strategies, but certainly we will go deeper into this now. To conclude, Macro-regional strategies are new emerging experimental governance in Europe, laboratories. They are bringing all types of stakeholders into designing the future of Europe, and that is the essence of the macro-regional strategies as adaptive macro-regional development strategies. Unlike old formal strategies, for example, EU 2020, this one is very pragmatic. It aims to solve real macro-regional challenges that no country can solve alone. Built on participatory approaches, which bring together different perspectives in scoping and approaching the challenge or opportunity, and deliver both on the level of policy and that of action on the ground. So it is important to see that it's not just about policies understood as legislation, but it's also very much on measures and things that we can do to improve our situation on the ground. Finding and financing common solutions require alignment of different funding sources too. Another reason to bring together various partners with access to funding and on national, regional and local levels. We are in the macro-regional strategies mixing different funding because different funding are aiming at solving different challenges. Different funding sources are aiming to involve different groups of stakeholders. And we make best use of this to mix them and to blend them in joint processes. And I will come back to that, how that is done. Let's go to the second question. What challenges or opportunities do macro-regional strategies address? We can't cover everything. So what do we focus on? Well, first of all, the challenge should be larger than one country can handle. Opportunities should be more effective and innovative to address together. And the focus here is to define the macro-regional added value. And when we have done that, we put it into an action plan. And these action plans are updated relatively frequently, often every third or fourth, fifth year. This is why the strategies are, as I said before, adaptive to challenges and opportunities that are changing. For example, when we had the inflow of refugees 2015-16, the strategy adapted and added a chapter on working with integration of migrants. The third question, how are macro-regional strategies implemented? And here we really had the difference here. This is the innovative in the macro-regional strategies, is very much in the how. We are implementing the strategies with three different formats. One is single projects, and they are often the ETC projects, Interreg projects, labeled as flagship projects. This is how it all started 10 years ago, that we were working with the projects and they were labeled to be good examples of how in the best way the strategy can be implemented. But today we have learned that single projects are simply not enough to be able to address and solve and deliver on the very complex societal challenges that we are addressing. So we need to work with project platforms. It's basically clusters of projects with different funding that are gathered in a platform. This is something that started to grow somewhere in 2013-14, when we realized that we need to cluster the projects. We need to work together with different sources. We need to organize chains of projects in order to get a better impact. But that was not enough either. Even though both these still exists, we are now moving into what is named flagships. And that's why it's also a very nice picture of a Polish flagship here, Frédéric Chopin. And what are flagships? Well, they are thematic, impact-driven, long-term, stakeholder-based policy action processes. That sounds complicated, but I will soon explain more about this. This is how the macro-regional strategies now are more and more implemented, because we are creating own platforms for collaboration where these different single projects and project platforms are integrated. So what is a flagship? Well, it's a joint transnational development process. Within the macro-regional strategy framework, the collaborative processes are called flagships, strategic actions born to respond to macro-regional challenges or opportunities for which they gather relevant stakeholders from all levels of society. So this is the response to the action plan. Flagships become the home, the containers for projects, change of projects, processes, thematic groups, and platforms that together produce a much higher impact on the issue compared to single projects or project platforms. A flagship has a structure with a flagship leader and the coordinators of thematic platforms. Stakeholders become members of flagships and decide in which way and how long they would like to be engaged. They participate with own resources, and flagships are designed to exist as long as the challenge or opportunity need to be addressed. So they have their own structure. They have a flagship leader that often is an institution that are owning the challenge or opportunity, that are working with this challenge and opportunity with or without the macro-regional strategy. So it's a sustainability inbuilt in this. For example, we have a flagship on named School to Work, where it is SALAR, the Swedish Association of Local Authorities and Regions, that are the flagship leader. We also can see in these flagships that the participants participate with own resources. We are setting the scene, we are organizing the process in the macro-regional strategy, but municipalities and other stakeholders are coming together with their own funding, because it is an added value for them to work together transnationally. They are not working together because there is a project that's funding them. They are doing it because they need it. They see the added value to work closer together. And finally, they are long-term, these flagships, because no one of these challenges can be solved in 3 years. That is a normal length of a project. They are much, much more longer. I have a little picture here just illustrating how a work can look like in a flagship. This is a picture illustrating a thematic working group, where you see the different stakeholders sitting around the table, public authorities, civil society, business, research, and together they are developing new policy briefings, new measures that can be implemented on the local level, on the regional level, on the national level. They have a process facilitator that helps to develop this in this group. They also have a research officer feeding in with action research and other research information on how things are done and solved in other parts of the world. And this is one of the formats how the flagships are working together. A very popular one where those people sitting around the table, as I said before, are not financed through any project. They're doing this because they see an added value for their own organization. And the results from the work can also be taken home directly to their own organization and implemented. If we look at the funding, because certainly we said these 3 no's, there are no extra funding. So how do we finance these flagships? Well, they are a flagship. There is a thematic platform or several thematic platforms. Often the mainstream programs fits very well to this format of flagships. You can have national and regional ERDF or ESF projects in the member states. For example, here you can see 3. It could be, for example, Sweden, Poland, and Estonia. And then you build this together with a transnational cooperation agreement, because it is allowed and it's encouraged to use transnational cooperation also in the mainstream programs. So that's one part of the financing. Then it's also often so that we have a sector program that is part of this, or several sector programs. If you speak about for example, integration of migrants, or we talk about education or the social sector, it is Erasmus+. But this could be Horizon, it could be other sector programs. And then we usually also have an interreg or several interreg projects. It could be both cross-borders or transnational projects. So as I said before, it's a mix of different funding, and this is how they are brought together to support the flagships. So what's the benefits of a flagship compared to a project? Well, the first one, all types of stakeholders can be brought together. Multi-level governance in practice, civil society are part of this. It's not so that it's limiting to a certain group of partners as it is in the project. Here it's open. Most of the stakeholders are members in the flagships. They don't pay membership fee, but they are signed up as members. The incompatibilities between the EU members and neighbors matter less, because microregional strategies is not just about EU members, it's also about neighbors. In our case, in the Baltic Sea strategy, we work with Russia, Norway, and Iceland. Sometimes Belarus is also part of this. And here, organization can bring their own funding to these flagships. And we don't need to have eligibility that they can be partners in projects. As I said before, they are no limited in time. As long as we need to work together, we do that. And often we see that there are more long-term flagships, because what we said before, the processes that we organize are addressing challenges that are complex or opportunities that also need to be addressed long-term. Real alignment of funding, it's the platform where the funding is possible to align, to mix. Real alignment of policies, because we are not just talking about the EU level or the national level or the regional level or local level. We are delivering and including the relevant policy levels, because in many of the challenges, there are some parts that is implemented on a local level. For example, on integration of migrants, it's very much on how to learn a new language and how to organize the integration on a local level. But there's also questions about how the funding schemes, how they can be supported at this on the national level. And it's also about certainly the EU level on migration. So we are working with the different policy levels. And very important also with the flagship is that the collaboration capacity of all involved grows through learning in action. Because what we are aiming at is to further integrate Europe. We would like to see that stakeholders in Europe are working closer together, not because of the project funding, but because they see an added value being members in a European Union where they have so much competencies gathered and they can then better address the challenges together. So in the end, there will be a larger impact on the macro-regional issue by working in this format. Today we have 4 macro-regional strategies in Europe. The oldest one is our Baltic Sea strategy from 2009. 2011, we got also the Danube strategy. 2014, the Adriatic-Ionian one, and the latest one is the Alpine strategy from 2016. It is a growing interest in Europe for this concept of working, so we know that there are discussions also to expand this group of macro-regional strategies. The prerequisites for the strategies varies, even though the concept, the way to work, the modus operandi is very much alike. Certainly, you see that in some examples we have quite many members of the European Union brought together, like in the Baltic and in the Alpine, so that sometimes you can say makes it easier. And in other strategies, there are half of the group of members that are members of the EU and the other half are not. That makes it certainly more complicated, but it's also a very strong driving force to work in this concept. If we have a closer look at our then Baltic Sea strategy, this is how it is organized. There are 3 overall objectives. It's save the sea, connect the region, and increase prosperity. And you see the satellites, these 13 policy areas that are about these circles, and they are covering basically a broad range of policies. You see that we have Nutri, hazards, bioeconomy, ship safe and secure around Save the Sea. We have transport and energy around Connect the Region, and we have tourism, culture, innovation, health and education around increased prosperity. These policy areas are coordinated by policy area coordinators. Often there are two of them, two institutions, organizations. In some cases there are three or even more. If also here you have the multi-level governance inbuilt, because those that are coordinating these areas are ministries and state agencies, but there are also intergovernmental organizations, and we also have NGOs. So it's real mix in this group. And then you have the horizontal actions. We have 4 of them. We have the spatial planning, we have neighbors, and we have capacity and climate. I'm working, as you know, with capacity, and then neighbors is quite obvious that it's with our neighboring country, Russia, Belarus, Norway, and Iceland. Climate is also a horizontal issue because it goes through all the policy areas, and so is spatial planning. I'm coming to the last slide now in this brief introduction. And this is to say something about who are the implementing stakeholders. Who are those that are working together in these strategies? If we look at the group I already mentioned, we have the policy area coordinators I mentioned, and the horizontal action coordinators that you saw from the previous slide. We also have the national coordinators that we have one in each of the member states. And in this case, there is usually so that they are placed with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with one exception, Sweden, where the national coordinator is placed at the Prime Minister's office. These are the coordinators both when it comes to the coordination of the whole strategy, but it is also the national coordination, the implementation of the strategy in the member states. This group is some 50 people working with these 3 tasks. The other group we have is the policy area focal points and the members of steering groups. Each of the policy area horizontal action, they have a steering group. It's usually the line ministries that are in charge of the policy at hand, the issue at hand, and the policy area focal points are appointed at those ministries. So, for example, when it comes to policy area education, it is the Ministry of Education and Science and the Ministry of Employment in the member states that are policy area focal points. And this is the group, as you know, that we now will focus very much on when it comes to the program on alignment of policy making. We have also flagship leaders, and we have project developers and project managers. This is very much the engine of the flagships here. And the flagship leaders I already touched upon, that are institutions that works with the different flagships and coordinate them, and there are a lot of projects that are gathered in those flagships. We also have the financial programs. If you speak about the structural funds and the mainstream programs, we have managing authorities, and here we have so-called managing authority networks that facilitate the collaboration between the member states using the mainstream programs for the support of the macro-regional strategies. And we have 4 such MA networks in the Baltic Sea strategy. We have one for the ERDF, one for the ESF, and then we also have for the Maritime and Fishery Fund and also the Rural Development Fund. And finally, we also have the joint secretariats where the ETC programs are, and here we certainly have the Baltic Sea region program, but also the cross-border programs that are in our region. And the final group of stakeholders that are working together are certainly the multi-level governance group with local and regional authorities, NGOs, business and academy. that are working in the different processes that we organize. All of us are gathering once a year to an annual forum. And this is an opportunity to get to know the strategy and to learn more about what's happening in the strategy, but also to find partners and colleagues to work together with, and to how to find information on integrating in flagships, etc. So if you haven't been to an annual forum, I really recommend you to take this opportunity. So these were a brief introduction to the macro-regional strategies. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Anders, for this really comprehensive video.